Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Jennifer LaRue. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Mark Twain House and Museum in Hartford, Connecticut. And I have to tell you, I am so looking forward to this evening's program, and I'm glad to see so many people registered for what's going to be a really amazing conversation. We're going to be here tonight with Kelly Williams Brown and Brini Maxwell to talk about Kelly's new book, Easy Crafts for the Insane. So settle in and get ready for a fun time. I'm not going to stay on screen for very long, but I just have a little bit of housekeeping to do. First of all, though we've been doing these virtual programs for so long, many of you may be new to Crowdcast, which is the program that we use, the platform that we use. So just a few notes about Crowdcast. You can chat, and I hope you will get in the chat area and let us know where you're from and just say hi. But we are going to be doing questions and answers toward the end of our program. And if you want to ask a question of either of our speakers tonight, please put it in the Ask a Question area. And perhaps you received my email earlier today saying that unlike most of our programs, tonight we're inviting you to actually come on screen if you choose to do so, to pose your question. So if you have a question and you would like to come on screen, please post your question down there and then say, beam me up. And if you don't want to come on screen, simply don't say beam me up. And I'll be helping manage all of that toward the end of the program. So we look forward to your questions, and thanks in advance for those. While we're looking at the bottom of the screen, I'd like to call your attention, please, to that long green button that says your support is vital to the Mark Twain House and Museum. Please donate here. I know everybody's really weary of COVID and donations and support and all that stuff. But just a reminder that it's been a really hard time for museums such as the Mark Twain House and Museum. We are a private nonprofit organization. We don't rely on state or federal funds. We rely on earned income to keep ourselves going. And for much of the past year, we have been without our major revenue source, which is our guided house tour. I'm delighted to say that we are back in business and offering the house tour, and people are coming in droves, which is very, very gratifying. But we have a little bit of catch-up ball to play. So throughout the pandemic, we have been staying engaged with our audiences, communities such as you, by offering these virtual programs, often as many as 3 evenings a week. And it hasn't been free for us. It's been free for you all to participate, but not free for us. So all this is by way of saying that if you're able, and I know not everybody is, to donate tonight by clicking on that button, just know that on behalf of the staff and the trustees of the Mark Twain House and Museum, every single penny is appreciated, and every single penny is put to very, very good use. So thank you in advance for that. One more note of housekeeping. You'll see in the very first item in the chat is a link to purchase a signed copy of Easy Crafts for the Insane. It's a fabulous book, and you do want to buy this book. If you purchase it by following that link, know that you are getting a signed copy, which is not always the case if you order elsewhere. And do know, too, that your purchase is supporting the Mark Twain House and Museum, and again, that we appreciate that very much. So having said all that, I think I'm ready to introduce our guests. First, I want to thank our sponsors. Tonight's program, like so many of our programs, is sponsored by the Wish You Well Foundation and by our media sponsor, Connecticut Public, WNPR. And the program is produced in part with support honoring the legacy of Frank Lord. So I will first introduce Brini Maxwell, described as America's domestic doyenne. She first began sharing her domestic know-how with other Manhattanites in 1998 through her self-titled cable access television show. After 5 years on the local airwaves, the Brini Maxwell Show was picked up nationally by the Style Network. The subsequent series has been called a delightful success and has attracted a diverse audience through its national platform. She has shared her wealth of knowledge in numerous media interviews, CNN, MSNBC, Late Night with Conan O'Brien, all kinds of places. And she, in 2005, released her first book, Brini Maxwell's Guide to Gracious Living. And she's an old friend of the Mark Twain House's, having introduced famed Hints columnist Heloise for her appearance at the Mark Twain House here in Hartford. So welcome to Brini. Kelly Williams Brown is an author and reporter living in Salem, Oregon. with a large, loud dog named Eleanor, who you may hear from this evening, but I think Eleanor is being a good girl tonight. She's the author of Easy Crafts for the Insane, which we're talking about tonight, Gracious, and Adulting, How to Become a Grown-Up in 535 Easy-ish Steps. She's also worked as a reporter and columnist for daily newspapers and magazines, an ad copywriter, nonprofit communications manager, and as a cocktail waitress. Born in Louisiana, she attended Loyola University in New Orleans, and we're so delighted to have her here tonight. So part of tonight's fun is the fact that once you'll see in a moment that Brini and Kelly are wearing fabulous outfits, and I'm going to just tell you a tiny bit about both of them. First, I'm going to tell you about mine. I'm wearing Michael Kors, purchased at TJ Maxx. But Brini is wearing a brick red sequin halter neck gown made by her of vintage fabric for her recent holiday special. It's lined in matching brick red satin and accessorized with gold jewelry. And Kelly is wearing a 1990s Musani couture gown from Little Red Rocket Vintage in Shreveport, Louisiana. You won't be able to see unless she does get up and show, which maybe she'll do, but she wants you all to know that there is a beautiful train on the dress. So having introduced our guests, I'd like to bring them both on screen. And everybody please give a big Mark Twain House welcome to Kelly Williams Brown. And where are you, Kelly? There we go. There you go.
Hello, everyone.
And thank you for being here. Now, we are having a little bit of an audio issue that seems to have to do with my presence on the screen. So that's as good as an excuse as I can think of for me to disappear for a little while and let Kelly and Brini just talk without my interference. I'm going to sit back and have fun. Everybody else sit back and have fun. And don't forget about your questions in the Ask a Question area. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm so excited to be here. I really am, Brini.
Oh, well, I'm so excited to have a chance to sit and talk with you because I really enjoyed your book.
Thank you.
Before we get into that, and because people are still trickling in, I wanted to ask you a question about your gown, which, quite frankly,
this whole thing, this little slip of a scrap, I barely know. What would you like to know about my gown, Brini?
Well, you in discussing it earlier, you just tossed off that it had been free.
Yes, it was. I am lucky to have so many wonderful friends, and one of them is Henrietta Wildsmith, which is just about the best name that anyone's ever been given. And she is a fabulous photojournalist, but also runs a fabulous vintage shop via the internet called Retro Red Rocket, and she is on Etsy, and she lives in Shreveport, so she tends to find a lot of, like in Louisiana, people get gussied up an awful lot.
Really? I didn't know that.
Well, you've got Mardi Gras balls, you've got regular balls, you've got debutante balls, you've got costumes. You know,
well, it's definitely not a debutante outfit.
No, I feel like this is more of like a Disney villainous outfit.
I think so, yes.
And I'm delighted to be able to squeeze into it during these quarantine times.
Well, you do. You look spectacular.
Thank you.
So, Kelly, your book, which I have and have read and think is just delightful, remarkable, lots of fun. It's really funny, but the subject matter is not particularly what one would think of as comedic fodder. How is it that you can make illness and injury so funny?
Well, yes, it's funny about the darkest things. I mean, not the darkest. That's really overstating it. Some very bad, but also human stuff I went through, including an unfortunate mental breakdown, leading to a rest cure, what we shall call a rest cure at an inpatient facility.
Mm-hmm.
And then like breaking through my 4 limbs and going through divorce, and my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And, I think for me, saying what's funny about this situation is always a really good way to deal with something, to deal with trauma or to deal with something you're afraid of, because that's taking it and making fun of it. I mean, which is something like satire has always been a wonderful weapon of the powerless against the powerful. And, you know, when I feel powerless and these other things feel very powerful, I can do that. And wonderfully enough, I've gotten really good at doing it fast. So even now when something horrible is happening, I also tend to think, okay, but this is kind of funny. And that cheers me up in the moment. You know what I mean?
That's very good. You know, being able to find humor in a situation is a skill. It sounds like it's like a muscle that you have really developed in a way that has served you very well. Now, one question I had for you is your sense of humor useful to you in situations like this, or has it really been more for other people's benefit?
Oh, I think it's very much for my benefit. In fact, I think, you know, one thing you could say about this book, and that some people have said when after reading it, is, well, I feel like you're being a little bit flippant about really serious mental health issues. And one of those people might be my mother, who thought that. You know, certainly my mother finds these things much less funny, I think, than I do, you know, and but for me, it's like, you know, something bad has happened. And so now I either get to feel sad about it forever, or I get to try to figure out what's amusing about it. What's the story here? Even if like maybe the story that I tell myself about it is a little bit better than what actually happened. I'll give you a very recent example. So if you write a book, you are so excited for Pub Day. You've been thinking about this one day for like a year. Like, how far are we from this day? This day is 2 months away. This day is 1 month away. And now the day is here. And you wake up and the world has completely continued to spin, regardless of your incredible literary achievement and contribution to, you know, the annals of human wisdom. And so I was like, well, that's fine. You know, it's fine that my book is, you know, ranked number 1 millionth on Amazon at this moment. It's going to pick up. And I was like, well, but I have a great interview coming up with a local TV that I've done before. And she's like lovely and gracious, and it's going to be wonderful. We're going to do great. And so I like sign on for it, and we make a little joke off the air. And then her first question is, so why did your marriage collapse? And what I would have said now is I would have said, well, we'll pick a name, Jennifer, for many reasons, which I get into in the book. But what's really important is, you know, I had this loss of identity of like, I thought I was this person and then I wasn't. But what I said instead was, oh, well, he's a great guy. He is a good guy. And then I like start like enumerating his good qualities. And then I'm like, but we couldn't get along. Like, I don't know what we fought about. So we fought all the time. Other people didn't like it. And I'm just like rambling. And I'm like, stop, shut up. And then I did. And then her second question is, tell me about your stay in the psychiatric unit. So it wasn't the most easy, you know, it wasn't the most gentle launch. But now, rather than being sad about that, my mother afterwards called me and she's like, well, on the upside, it's possible that not many people saw it.
That's the upside.
That's the upside.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, but when you can laugh about things that have happened and when you interpret them as not the world is against me, or like this is so typical, or bad things always happen to me, or like whatever the story you're telling yourself about what just happened to you, I find really influences my later ability to process feelings about that event in what I consider to be a more healthy way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you've done very well with it in the book, certainly. Now, tell me, your background as a reporter, how much of that has been helpful for you in this sort of writing of memoir?
Right. It was honestly like really hard because you know, when you're a reporter, you want to report things exactly as they happen. Like the idea being that, you know, if you, Brini, had been in the room with me while I was taking these notes and recording, then you would have heard it the same way that I did. And that is like a nice objective truth. And it is very difficult to get objective truths on things that aren't like these people voted yes, these people voted no, you know, on the city council or whatever. And I was very stressed out about, you know, I can only tell this story from my perspective. I did do things like I would look back at text messages and notes and emails, and in some cases like medical records and things. And then I talked to several, but critically not all of the people involved in the story. One thing that's kind of made it a challenge is that 3 of the very central characters, I don't really have relationships with them anymore. One is an ex and two are these two friendships I lost. And so doing that in the absence of them without getting the chance to be like, okay, well, let's get a quote from you about your experience was very stressful. And so as a result of that, I just really tried to constantly err on the side of tact and in many cases, like discretion of like, what is my story to tell? What isn't my story to tell? What do people consent to by being friends with a writer? Like there's that old saying about never date a writer because they'll put you in a novel. The people who are gracious enough to date me, I don't want them to feel or be friends with me or be in my life. I don't want them to feel like I'm constantly just writing down things to spring upon them.
Right. No, of course. So I noticed that in the book, you even reference this. You say at one point that essentially, I don't think I'm paraphrasing, but you say the old saw, the names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And it's really interesting, the way you can pull the good from the bad situations. I don't get a sense from the book that there is any vindictiveness or ill feeling. It sounds like you have really come to a good place in your memory of this time and these people who were triggering to you in one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, so, and two things are separate, right? Like, I do feel like I'm in a really good place, and I really wanted to keep any anger or vindictiveness or whatever out of the book. And I'll be honest, like when I started writing the book, it wasn't that far away from the events. Like I'm much further away now. Books take a long time. And also, I heard something the other day that really spoke to and resonated with me. And it was a writer, Elizabeth Brunig, did a podcast on Vox Conversations about forgiveness. And one thing that she said that really struck me is forgiveness is a practice. Like you have to do it again and again, the same way people do sobriety or, being, physically healthy. And she said, you'll just be standing by the sink and it's a Tuesday. And all of a sudden these thoughts and these feelings come up like, how could this person do this to me? Like I was just going along. And I can't be the person that I used to be before this happened. And she said, and that's when you really decide that you're forgiving and you're setting something down, and also it's worth being said, I'm sure those people have stuff that they need or could forgive me for. I don't know if they have or not, but I think it also helps me to remember that when relationships and people are turbulent, there can be a lot of just unhealthy stuff and dysfunction to go around. You know what I mean? Like it's very rarely like my life was great and then this person came and did XYZ to me, or the opposite. It's people building unhealthy relationships together.
Yeah. Well, those unhealthy relationships are great sort of jumping off points for finding the next place in your life, finding the better emotions, finding the better situation, finding what you want, finding your desires.
Right.
So,
exactly.
And I think you've done a really nice job of taking yourself there and taking us there along the way with the book. What's interesting is that there is a little bit of an interesting tug of war between the inner landscape that's going on with you and the one that you're showing the world at the time that this is happening. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how that is sort of illustrated in the book?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a deep human thing to want to not appear vulnerable. Like, I think that that's something that is kind of built into all of us, like social animals, we're pack animals, we don't want to look like the one that's slowing everything down. And so, obviously I had that natural tendency. I also had these other two books that were advice books, albeit advice that I reported from other people. I do want to be clear on that. I was not saying that I had the advice. I said that other people had the advice and I could go find it and then I could write it down because I wanted to be an adult and I wanted to be a gracious person, not because I had mastered those things. But there was still this idea of me as like this put together person, when I put on a good mask, like a lot of people do, and one tool, one tool in my box, there we go, was that, I just wouldn't be around. I just wouldn't see people. Like, it'd be like, okay, well, I will only like sort of leave the house maybe once every couple of weeks or something. And when I do, my hair is done, my makeup's done, I'm fine. Everything is fine. You just don't see me. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's so hard to say I'm not okay. And I don't know that you can help me not be okay, but I just want you to know that. And that's why you're not seeing me. That's why you're not hearing from me. But I even did a really good job when I was in the ward, in a sanitarium, because I would always I would dress up every day in my business casual dresses that I had asked my boyfriend to bring me. So it would be like, a nice long sleeve, gray Banana Republic number with nude heels. And that led to a couple of both staff and patients thinking that I was actually working there, that I had been hired.
I remember that in the book. That's very funny.
Yeah. And one of them was like, why are you doing all this? Like, your hair, your makeup. I was like, well, my schedule is pretty clear. You know what I mean? There's not a lot going on for me besides introspection hour, and that's only 1 hour. So, once you've introspected, you gotta do something else.
Right. And it sounds like you were taking advantage of that. Yeah. So one of the things that you talk about is the physical logistics of dealing with broken limbs and how complicated it is. And some of that stuff is very funny. You have a list of things that you cannot do with your arm in a full arm cast. And I have a similar experience of that. When I was in first grade, I was hit by a car and my leg was broken. And so for 6 weeks, I was in a full body cast, kind of right up here.
Oh no!
Yeah, and I couldn't stand up. And I would roll around on this cart on the floor. And
I'm sorry, I know it's terrible to laugh at that.
I know, it's funny. And my parents rented this cart. I still remember it. It had ball casters and red vinyl upholstery. It was like a rolling barca lounger.
Did you have to have a Superman around? Like, what was your posture?
Yeah, laying flat on it and wheeling around. It was over Christmas, and my parents bought me a little teeny tiny Christmas tree that I got to decorate on my own, that I had for many years. Little plastic Christmas tree. Oh. And then at night, my father would have to physically carry not only the cast but me up the stairs. And so it was enormously heavy.
Did he just was he, because you're a flat plane, you're an unbendable plane, right?
Right, pretty much.
So he just like that?
Yeah, wow. Actually he is he is watching us tonight somewhere out there. So this is a thank you to you, Dad, for carrying me up the stairs every night for 6 weeks in that plaster cast.
Oh my gosh. That is, okay. All I can think of is just all the bonking into things and trying to get you turned. I mean, luckily you're what, 6 or 7, so you're small.
Right. Yeah. So I was the master of the 3-point turn.
Did your arms dangle down? Or did you rest them?
It was that was what I sort of navigated with, was my arms. I was pulling myself around on the rug, on the main floor of the house. Yeah.
Well, that sounds incredibly tragic. And I also wish I had an opportunity to watch a human going through that. So for me, what had happened is first I broke this elbow because I thought I could ice skate. I had I've never been good at ice skating, but the boyfriend at the time was all me a little tutorial. And then all of a sudden I was like, wow, I'm really good at this. I'm so elegant. People are probably looking at me. I look so great. And then bam, right down, break the elbow. In my defense, there was a small child who stopped right in front of me. So I had to do that. I had to not fall.
Tripped over the child. Right.
So at this point I have, a long arm cast, I've got little fingers out, and you got a thumb. So you can do, let's see if I have anything on my desk that would be appropriate. You can maybe do something like this, because this is a good radius for when these guys are stuck, but it can't be too heavy because it's only the little end of the finger. And then I had this shortly thereafter fractured and dislocated this shoulder, at which point it had to be sort of strapped to my waist. So like all my angles were like very different than like what you normally think of. Like you have to be closer to things, but your elbow has to be down more. And I could also like, I could do like, what I would do is like bend over and get an item and then sort of swing my casted arm down to put it in my hand. And then I could sort of manipulate things if they were right by my belly button. And that was the arena that I had. So it was very surprising because, and certainly temporary, and I'm very fortunate, but I went from being sort of mostly able-bodied to being quite disabled over the course of 3 weeks. And that was, I found it limiting, Brini. If somebody asked, is not having any arms
just a little bit,
is it a pain? I would say yes. It's frustrating.
Not a life goal, right?
I wouldn't recommend it. I couldn't recommend it in good conscience.
Oh, that's good to know. We'll keep that in mind. So during that time, you weren't able to do that much crafting, but you found that crafting was really helpful to you, and you have crafts in the book that I think are really a lot of fun. One of those crafts is your origami stars. And I understand that you are going to make one for us tonight.
I am going to make one for you today, but I feel like the biggest ding dong in the world, it's on that table back there. But Brini, could you tell the crowd a tiny bit more? And this will give me a chance to show off my gown in the background as I go and grab them.
I was thinking it's actually a very good,
wonderful,
opportunity.
Will you be okay on your own?
I think I can manage.
Okay, I think it's a 10-second lap, so I'll return very shortly.
All right, thank you, Kelly. So yes, there is Kelly's gown. Look, it has a train. Look, there's a train on this gown.
I didn't lie to make friends, Brini, not like normal.
And it has a lovely high leg slit too.
Thank you. Thank you for noticing all these things about my gown.
Well, see, that was the perfect opportunity for you to show it off to me.
It was so natural too. I mean, it felt very right.
Yes.
So I love lucky paper stars. This represents perhaps maybe a tenth of my total star output. There are many more bowls of these, and I've given them away. I've used them as like packaging materials. I'll give people a cup of them in like a pretty little old coupe if they are feeling down, and they can just set it somewhere and look at it. And it's a very nice, very tidy and easy to do craft, because all you need is a strip of paper and maybe about 1 centimeter wide by maybe 10 inches long. I actually purchased this off a certain giant online retailer. And because you can see it has a cute pattern. I guess you can't really see. So this is how you do it. You take your strip and you're going to make what I call like a little awareness ribbon loop.
Yes.
Just like that.
Yeah.
It looks like you would do that. And then you take this shorter tail end, which should be behind the long end, and you sort of tuck it up and in. So it's essentially like you're tying a little tiny knot in the paper. And then you slowly squeeze it closed like this, and you just have to go kind of slowly to do that. And then you'll notice that it's now in the shape a little bit of a little pentagon. So you take the tail and you fold it over and you tuck it back in. Of course, I'm very nervous. I've never done this for the Mark Twain House and Museum before. So now you have something that looks a little bit like this. And again, I wish I could get a better contrast. But when you begin to fold it, it sort of follows the curvature of the pentagon and winds around naturally, just like, you remember how you used to make a star by doing this? Mm-hmm. Like that kind of geometry? That's the geometry that you will find here. And so you keep winding. If you've ever been someone who's folded a paper straw wrapper around and around on itself, this will be a somewhat familiar.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then when you get to the very end and you just have a little tiny bit of tail left, you tuck it in, you tuck it under the flap. There's going to be a flap conveniently located there. And so now you have your little pentagon that looks nice like this. Now you have to hold it. This is extremely critical. You cannot hold it like this because it's going to puff outward. You must hold it by the edges. If it does not,
right now it looks like the Chrysler logo.
Exactly. Precisely. Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to say. So then you take your little fingernails and you begin to pinch at the edges to form a little point. And then you rotate it around and you pinch again.
X edges, yeah.
Rotate it around and pinch again, and then you pinch one last time. So as you can see, this one is not perfect in its geometry, and really none of them ever are. But that's the charm of them. That's the beauty of them. They're very, they're very handmade, and they look like candy. I've had people pop them in their mouth. Be sad when it doesn't get what they would like out of it.
Right, exactly.
But I do highly recommend paper stars. And I would also say that if you're interested in making paper stars, that is a very YouTubeable thing that might not be having quite the excitement of not really being able to see it that my demo just had. But
or the fact that the person making them was not wearing an evening gown.
That's true. That's the downside, presumably, to most of these videos.
Right. Yes.
Only the finest.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about how crafting has been therapeutic for you.
Sure. So it's funny, since the book came out, I've had like a lot of people who really need to tell me, like, I'm not crafty. And I'm like, well, it's mostly not a crafts book, and really it could be a very similar book if it were easy recipes for the insane or easy gardening for the insane. Like, the point of crafting to me is that you're working with your hand and you're working with your body, and you're sort of getting outside of the normal like swirl of thoughts and judgments and emotions and mean thoughts about yourself, mean thoughts about others. And instead you're sort of really zooming in and thinking, okay, well, now the needle is going to come out from this location and it's going to go back in there, and I'm going to do that again and again. One challenge with, showing a craft is that you feel a need to rush it. And the point of a craft is that it takes some time, and you're going slowly and it is leisurely. And I always recommend that people not craft with like an outcome in mind, like, because I think the point of the art, as my family friend Carol said, she's an artist, and she said, I don't think that much about the work after I've made it. She's like, sometimes I like it in the moment and then I don't like it later, or I don't like it in the moment, but I do like it later, or I just really don't have any thoughts about it. She said, the point is the doing, and then other people can enjoy it or not, And I hate the idea of people thinking of crafting as like another arena they can fail in, where really crafting or gardening or cooking or playing an instrument or whatever it is that you choose to do for you.
Another for anxiety.
Right. And I think they're really wonderful things. And I also think, sometimes things are just bad in life. You're going through grief, or you're going, you know what I mean? And sometimes you just kind of need to while the days away because the only thing that's going to work is time. And that's another good time for crafting. Yes,
I agree. That's a really good perspective.
Thank you.
Speaking of crafting, can you tell us about Carl?
Carl. Oh, yes, I can tell you about Carl. So I'm going to start this with a couple of caveats. Number one, when they say that like you can go into a mania or make a suicide attempt as a side result of an antidepressant, they weren't kidding. That's real. That happens. It happened to me. I had been depressed, and then someone, like a mental health nurse practitioner, was like, well, there's this new medication out. It's a new type. Like, let's try you on it. And what happened is that it sent me into a very dangerous state called a mixed manic state, I think, where it's like I had the same depression, like the depression had not really been addressed. So I still felt very terrible about myself and a lot of things. But all of a sudden I had lots of energy, no inhibitions, and poor decision-making skills, and a lot of energy and get up and go behind it. So to describe this period in the book, I decided to, because it, again and again, I had to think, okay, how can we make this funny? Like, what's funny here? So what I decided to do for this period, which I'm sorry, this is a content warning. It did lead up to a suicide attempt. If you are having any trouble, please call a crisis line, 800-273-TALK. They are great. You don't have to be on the edge of anything to call them. Just if you're feeling bad or sad or lonely, they are great free resources that are there 100% of the time. So that being said, what I decided to do was rank my creative output during that time, because I had so many ideas. And some of them actually were really, really good. Like, I wanted to open a women's co-working and art space cooperative here in Salem, which is easy to do because rents are cheap. And, it would have a big, you know, like it would have all these power tools in the basement. And I was going to do it with like a former art and shop teacher and then a woman who's like a great community organizer in town. That was a good idea. And then I had an idea that like your Apple iPhone would like make a different color depending on what your mood was and whether you were willing to be interrupted or not. Because, you know, sometimes when you're on your phone, you're just kind of effing around. And then sometimes on your phone, you're like reading a novel and it's like, I want everyone to know I'm doing important work and cannot be interrupted. So there was that, and that's okay, fine. And then I decided that I wanted a, what's it called? An awning for back here for this little tiny patio I have out here. And I wasn't going to buy an awning. I was going to make an awning. And have I ever made an awning before? No, I have not. Did I like consult with anyone who had made an awning on how to make an awning? I did not do that. No. What I did do was make a decision that I was going to use 6-foot chicken wire that I had like woven all these ribbons through in a pattern. And then I was going to take a clear vinyl sheet and use a heat gun to melt it on top. And then I would TBD how it was going to connect. So really like the outcome of this was just like, I had like I said, a 6-foot tall roll of chicken wire with like carefully threaded all the ribbons through. And I named him Carl. Carl, like it was a long time before I gave up the dream with Carl. And I was like, you know, I was out of the hospital. I was feeling better. And it was like, you need to get rid of Carl. Like Carl being on your porch indefinitely is not a sign of good health here. But, you know, he was actually more charming than you'd think. And the fun thing about a big 6-foot tall piece of chicken wire is that if you can avoid getting scratched up, it's very light. So you can kind of hoist it around a la your father and you. Probably easier to carry around, but yes.
All right. Very good. So now we talked about the therapeutic nature of crafting, but when you wrote this book, did you find that writing the book was therapeutic for you?
That's yes and no. I think what was therapeutic about it for me was that I really got to go back to all of these stories and these things that happened and really try to look at it from all the different angles, like not just my perspective and how I experienced it, but like how other people might have experienced these things as well. And I think that was really helpful, like I said, for, you know, sort of letting go of some really painful stuff or maybe some anger that I held. It wasn't great for my mental health insofar as it's hard because I'm a really different person now than I was when I wrote this book. Like the events of this book all took place like 3.5 years ago, you know, and I've worked really hard since then and I've really built a different life. And so it's been a challenge to constantly be time traveling back to that and just really like staying in that place. And also staying in a place where I was doing things like, you know, looking up old medical records when they had discharged me from the hospital because they thought I was a pill seeker, but my shoulder was fractured and dislocated and they just hadn't x-rayed it, you know, and like the medical record of that night, you know, said that like I would become shrill and hysterical when I thought someone was looking at me, but otherwise no apparent distress. And so that hurt, you know, sometimes you set things down and this was not always great for that. The big edits happened last summer. My editor at Penguin Random House, Michelle Howry, is a truly amazing editor. And we went like 6 or 7 rounds. But just living in a really bad place for you was hard. And I was like very relieved once I got to sort of the chapters at the end, which are like when I look at my life and I'm like, well, okay, so you're not that person anymore. You don't have that life anymore. You don't have those people anymore. Like, what is it going to be now? Like, how do we rebuild? It can't just be destruction forever. And sort of talking about the process of how I rebuilt. And that felt really good. And it felt like an opportunity, you know, when I do revisit the book, it reminds me how far I've come and how much I've done and how I'm really proud of myself in that way. And so that's the nice thing about it. So there's a very complicated answer to what could have been a simple question.
Well, I think that's a very good answer. I think it really illustrates that you have some big takeaways that you've gotten from that time in your life. And the book helped maybe crystallize some of that a little bit for you, even if it was painful. Yeah. So I think that's good. So we have about 20 minutes left in the stated time. We can certainly stay a little bit longer if there is more interest for questions, but we'd love to start taking some questions from you. You see on the bottom, there's an ask a question field. You can just enter your question right in there. We have one question to start. Let's see what question is it? Stephanie has a question for you, and she says, where can I get her earrings?
Oh, you can get these from Putzfrau. That's Putzfrau. Putzfrau. I think it means maybe housewife or housewretch in German. It means something in German. So you have to search for Putzfrau Vintage Portland. And she makes wonderful earrings that are cast in resin, and they're very light. I actually got them. It was a very satisfying moment of my life because I was at the Standard, which is a fun dive bar in Portland, and the bartender had these earrings on, and I said, those earrings are amazing. Where did you get them? And she said, they're in the vending machine over there. It's like you never have that level of satisfaction and ability to immediately purchase. So thank you for that. And I highly recommend. They have very cool stuff. And I contacted her to see if I could get a couple more pairs made, and she was very gracious about it. So highly recommend.
Very good. Very good. So Robbie asks, did you journal throughout the events in the book to keep track of them, or was it all written from memory?
So it was partially from memory. A lot of it, I looked back on text messages and emails, and then I did interview people who were there for various things, or I would like share something and I would say, this is my recollection of it. Do you want to add to that? Like I interviewed my mother about the night of my suicide attempt, which was very hard. I think for both of us. And so I did it like that. I'm not actually a journaler. The sad truth is that I don't like writing that much. Like writing is not what I do for fun. I do lots of things for fun, and I enjoy lots of things. I enjoy having written, and I like sometimes when I'm writing and I'm really like in the flow of it. But generally it's like kind of an unpleasant and gruesome process. So I don't do it more than absolutely necessary.
Murray in Mary Tyler Moore says at one point when Bess asks him whether he likes writing, he says, well, I like reading my writing. I like getting paid for my writing.
Right. Yes.
I really like the writing process.
Well, it's fun. It's fun to announce that you're a writer professionally. Like that seems very glamorous and exciting compared to the reality of it, which is lots of time procrastinating and opening every other tab and going down every social media hole and finding out about every Twitter beef. And then at the last moment being like, burr, 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 burr. So yeah, more fun in theory than in practice. It's also funny because I always have a tendency to assume that I hate everything that I've written. And so I'm always pleasantly surprised when I go back and I'm like, oh, it's not terrible. Like it's not the best, but I don't hate it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you have a wonderful style. You're very readable and clever and funny, and it makes these sort of dark subjects come alive in a palatable and humorous way, which makes them very readable. And I think that is very valuable because people can really get something important out of your writing, and they will enjoy that in the process.
I mean, I always want something to be enjoyable for a reader to read. And I want people to feel like that it was worth their time, that they took something that related to their own life, or they learned some things maybe about, mental illness or whatever. And I'm very cognizant of that when I'm writing. I'm like, okay, this phrase, like, what is this doing for the reader? If you have a story, what is the story doing for the reader? Is it moving them along, or do you just think this is a funny story to tell that doesn't really fit in?
Right. Yeah. In film writing, they call that killing your darlings.
Oh yeah. Kill your babies.
Yeah. Yeah.
In journalism.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, it is a challenge to make sure that I'm really writing in service of the reader. I mean, when I would go talk at journalism classes back when I was a reporter, I would always say, just remember, you're never going to make anything more useful than a bus schedule. No matter how hard you work, you will never be as helpful to as many people as that one little document is,
Right.
So
yeah, prosaic document. Yeah,
exactly. It's a wonderful document if you need a schedule.
It is indeed. All right, let's see. What else have we got? The Mark Twain House says, Kelly, have you gotten any pushback over the word insane in your title?
No, well, surprisingly, the people who work in mental health or have perhaps themselves had some real mental health challenges think it's amazing. And then I've had two people be like, I don't think that younger people will like that. And this is perhaps from people who themselves would not be in that category as much. And we're really worried about like, what millennial and Gen Z readers would think. And so, I mean, I figure, I like the word insane. I think the language you use to describe yourself should be different than the language that you use to describe people whom you don't know or who are not people that you're close to. And I think you can describe situations however you like. So, it's a sensitive thing, but like, I figured, I really went through the ringer, Brini. Like I didn't survive, some massive, civil war or something, like the truly brutal stuff that humans go through. But a lot of stuff happened. It was a really, really, really hard 18 months, and it was compact too. That was the other thing that's hard to describe, is that all of these things happened about the course of a year and a half. Yeah. And at a certain point, it's just like, again, what's funny about this and how can I enjoy this? And if I call myself insane, then you can't, you know what I mean? And I think we always do tend to really, we're very careful with our language around mental illness, which I think is a really important thing. But I think it sometimes fails to capture that there's also some really funny things about mental illness. The same way there's funny things about physical injury, like you pooping around the house or me not having, you know what I mean? Like some things are just funny and you can laugh at them. And so this is definitely a nod to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's always empowering to reclaim words and language for yourself that are considered taboo for one reason or another. So I think that's powerful. Yeah. So let's see, what else do we have? Dana says, have you kept crafting in your life currently? Do you still do it?
I absolutely do. So up until a couple of weeks ago, I would say I have been doing less crafting because my mental health is quite good. I am in a relationship that makes me really happy. I have a lot of, friends and people to see in town now that things are loosening up again. And then once my book came out, I started making like 40 of these a day. Just anxiety, just constantly. So yeah, it's definitely a tool. I do find like if I find myself really compulsively, like I need this, then that's a really good time to ask myself, like, what's going on? How are you feeling? You know what I mean? Like, let's do a check-in and see if something is actually wrong that you just haven't spotted yet. But I definitely journal, or I definitely don't journal. I definitely craft. Sorry, I was looking at the window and the word journal popped out at me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. What are the crafts that you're currently sort of fascinated with besides the stars?
Well, I always love embroidery. Embroidery is long-term fun. For a little while, I don't know if I have any near. I have been making little yarn puffs with googly eyes because
like, pom-poms?
Yes, like a little pom, because that's a really satisfying craft because you just need a fork and you like wrap the yarn around and then you sort of tie it in the middle and then you cut the loops. And then it's just a process of, it's sort of like wonky. It's definitely not puff shaped. Yeah. So you just take scissors and just slowly. Yeah. Yeah, like your Edward Scissorhands or something. Yes. And so that is a very soothing craft as well. And then I do line cut prints. I do stuff more around holidays. Because I like to make things for people. Because I've definitely had, like, once I make it, I don't really need to have it. So I've had the experience of like, oh, I've made all these beautiful things and I'm throwing them away. So I like to be a little more focused.
That's good. I like that. Let's see. What else? All right. Mallory says, are there certain types of crafts you gravitate towards when you feel a certain way, anxious versus depressed versus uneasy, etc.?
That's a really interesting question, and I don't fully know. It would be my guess. I think when I'm anxious, I do go more for stuff like this, that is just fingers moving, and it's muscle memory, you know what I mean? Whereas I think maybe if I'm like sort of feeling like just more uneasy or just like I want to turn my brain off, I'll do something a little bit more involved, like making a line of cut print, because, you have to think about that. You have to sketch it. It takes a while. I do enjoy getting into like, I like to make my coworkers Valentines, and they're pretty simple. It's just like a little watercolor heart and their name written in script, and then I little gold glitter details on that. But I like crafts like that where it's sort of an assembly line where it's like, now we're just gonna paint 10 hearts in a row, you know.
Nice. I like that.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. All right. We have a beam me up. Cordelia, would you like?
Oh, Cordelia.
We'd love to see you with us. Come over.
Show us that beautiful face, Cordelia.
Jennifer, can you bring her up for us? All right. Well, we will wait for Jennifer to make that happen. It's Cordelia Carranza. So while we're waiting, I'm going to go to the next question, which is from Emily. Do you dress up in daily life? I follow a YouTube with numerous disabilities who dresses in vintage frocks because they bring her joy. Also, do people say you resemble Ellie Kemper? Can't wait to devour your book. Thanks for this talk.
Emily, I have many things to say, but we're going to switch right now to Cordelia, who has amazing earrings on.
I know. I love those earrings, Cordelia.
Fabulous.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I was just wondering, because you're definitely a crafter, but do you consider yourself an artist? And how do you use crafts to express yourself?
That's a really interesting and good question. I've read before, and I think a lot about how there's a little bit of a tendency to title stuff that women do as crafts, whereas males, more make art. And there's an interesting question there. I do think of myself as an artist, but it's funny because I don't really apply that label because I'm like, no, artists are people with actual talent. And if someone else said that to me, I'd be like, well, that's absurd. You're clearly an artist. You go around and you're creating things and you're like making the world more in your image, whether that's how you decorate or how you make a little tiny star. And so I do think I'm an artist. I use crafts a lot to express love. I really like making things for people, like I said, and I like to think that they like them. And it's just really like, an embroidery or something is just a way to say like, I really like you. And I spent dozens of hours on this little thing, and you don't have to like think that you don't have to know how much time I've spent, but I did. And like, I was just thinking about you as I did this and something you would really like. And so it's definitely like, I guess sort of a love language in that way. But yeah, I'm an artist. I'll take it. I'll own that. But it's hard. It's hard to like grown up or something. Like it's like, well, that's not really me. But
yeah, words have different values to us, and I think that it's interesting that you bring that up, Cordelia, because I think that when we claim those words for ourselves, it's empowering. So yes, yeah. Thank you for that question.
Yes, thank you so much.
I've never been on a Crowdcast before.
Yeah, well, welcome.
And your earrings are wonderful.
Yeah, they're really great, right? I love those fuzzy earrings. All right, so let's go back to Emily.
Yes, let's.
Do you dress up in your everyday life?
Am I screen sharing? Who is screen sharing? Oh, there we go. No more screen share. Yes, I absolutely dress up very much in my everyday life. Okay. I wear dresses every day. Dresses are easier than not dresses because it's only the one thing and you just put it on and then you pick shoes. And it cheers me up. It makes me feel like I'm bringing beauty into the world. I like how it looks. And also, I wrote a story that I really loved when I was like 22 or 23 in New Orleans. And I was writing about hat culture for the women because there's a strong hat culture, like definitely like among like Black church ladies who will have like head to toe fabulous new outfit every single week, never the same outfit twice, And then I remember this was a woman who was like sort of eccentric, living in a country home. She had this very glamorous life as a New York writer and everything before retiring to the country to like go a little bit to seed, but she had so many hats. I think she had 500 hats. And at one point I was like, why all the hats, Camille? And she's like, well, as I see it, I might be hit by a bus tomorrow, so I should probably wear a fabulous hat today. And I was like, yes, that's true. I should wear a fabulous hat today. Today's the day. I have heard the Ellie Kemper thing on 1 or 2 occasions, but I am very honored by the comparison, and I truly hope you enjoy the book.
Yes. So I think that's really great. Now, how many hats do you have?
Oh, that's a good question. I certainly have more than a dozen, perhaps up to 20 hats, if we are counting hats and fascinators.
Yes.
Yeah. Probably that. I used to be a real hat person. I haven't been as much for the past few years, but I do have, I mean, I might have more hats than that because I do have 4 hats that are made just of feathers. Like I have a little beautiful feather beret and like sort of this like sweeping. Actually, I had to get rid of one of them because it was cursed or haunted. Every time I put it on, something bad happened to me. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
I couldn't keep it in my home for that reason. And I will say for the record that these are all vintage. These birds were dead before I was alive, so I can do nothing to help them. That's my policy on fur.
Yes, I agree with you there. All right. So we have maybe time for another question or two if anyone wants to ask. We've run through what's in the queue. Jennifer has joined us again.
Because I just wanted to say, wow, what a conversation. You two have packed so much inspiration and thought-provoking ideas and just beauty into this hour. I'm so grateful to you both. And I know, Brini, you've been to the Mark Twain House. Kelly, have you been to the Mark Twain House?
I have not, but I'm going to New York in early August, and I am making the trek. I am coming out to see it. I have only seen pictures, and it looks exquisite. It looks like one of the most beautiful residences in the world.
Yes, it's really lovely. You'll really enjoy it. I love my time there.
We look forward to having you come visit us, and then sometime we'd love to have the two of you come and reprise this discussion or continue the conversation. And maybe we can like set it up and you guys can do some crafts and people can come and make stars or something.
I'm very excited about Kelly coming to join me at the event that I host in New York City. I host a crafting event called Make It with Brini.
Mm-hmm.
At Club Coming in New York City every Tuesday night from 6 to 8. And the next time that Kelly is in town on a Tuesday, she is going to come and join us and teach us origami.
Oh, wow.
I would love that. And also, if we come back, this time I get to interview Brini, and because Brini has so much wisdom and so much to share, and I just yammered on. But I am so honored to be here. Brini, thank you again. Thank you, Jennifer, for being just the most wonderful hostesses imaginable.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. And I have to say, people, so if you enjoyed the conversation, this book, so your voice is so, it just exudes your voice. And we've so enjoyed hearing you talk. So I encourage people, if you haven't already, to click that link if you want some more to tide you over until we can get more. I do want to remind people, too, that this program is recorded and it'll be up on the Mark Twain House website, which is very cleverly titled marktwainhouse.org. And so if you want to review the instructions, right, I know, for making the star, you can go back and watch it over and over again until you've mastered that skill. And I just want to give a shout out also to Eleanor, because she was a very, very good girl.
She was a very good girl. Smell Bell, come here. Come greet the people. Sorry, did not mean to. Come here. Oh, she's getting up slowly. She's a big old dinosaur.
Well, hi, Eleanor.
Oh, she did a big dog move where she got up and then she laid down in another position.
Of course she did. Well, give her our love, and also love to all of those of you who have made donations during our program tonight. We really appreciate it. So thank you so much, both of you, for this evening. It's been one of the highlights.
For inviting us, and I really feel like we had good chemistry together, Kelly.
I absolutely agree. I can't wink without like doing a weird thing with my mouth. It's something I need to work on, but it was so wonderful. And thank you to everyone who came and who hung out with us, and those amazing questions, those beautiful palm earrings. So much good stuff.
Well, let's do it again soon, and thank you. And also a shout out to my colleagues Mallory and Jacques, who helped make this happen and help pull together. Mallory's here in the audience tonight. Jacques was not able to be, but they're both here in spirit. So they'll be here in person when you come see us that way.
Perfect.
I need to talk. I'm sorry.
I said, I need to meet Jacques in person. He sent the single best email I've ever seen,
Yes.
where he was circling back. Oh, go ahead.
Jacques is a force of nature.
He is a force of nature. He is a force of nature.
He had very politely like asked a question and then circled back like a week later, very politely. And then when he needed to circle back again, he sent a picture of Prince going like that was all. It was the entire content of the email. And it was so perfect that I thought, my God, how can I do the same thing in my day-to-day life?
He will be so gratified to know that you mentioned that during the program. Yeah, he's great. He's a great, great friend.
Yeah.
Go and relax and do whatever you do. And maybe there's a craft in our future tonight.
Yes, indeed. Make a star.
I'll make a star too. Good night, both of you. Thank you so much. Good night to our wonderful audience. Thanks for your great questions.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.